On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors should be asking the same question about their basketball team that I ask when I sit down at the local pub. Can I get some wings?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, March the 20th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. One day left for you to get your entries in for the Locked On Raptors Listener Bracket Challenge. The code and all the links and all that stuff you need are in the Discord in the March Madness chat. So join us in there. We would love to see you. It's a great little community we got building around the show. Should be a great place to watch March Madness ball as we have the bracket going on and, of course, all the prospect watching that'll be going on for Toronto Raptors fans as well. Would love to see you there in the Discord. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. It's all appreciated when you do it. And we're also on YouTube. You can find the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel and subscribe. Hit the little, or I guess, yeah, subscribe. That's the name. Follow, or whatever the button is that it asks you to support the show on YouTube. Do that, and then also hit the notification bell, and it will give you a heads up every single time the show is about to premiere. On today's show, let's get to it. I got a bunch of mailbag questions we're going to dig into. We're going to talk about Team Canada and the prospective Olympic roster because, look, this is the state of the Toronto Raptors right now. They play a game tonight. They have none of their good players available. I don't know what we're supposed to do with the games happening on the court right now, so we'll talk about other stuff like Team Canada. We'll talk about the NBA draft. We'll talk about the need for wings being extremely dire on this team. A bunch of other good mailbag questions that came in as well. It's another reason to join the Discord, by the way. That's where you get your questions sent in and answered. That's the only place I'm taking questions from these days. So come and join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord. All right, let's get to it. The Discord server members have asked questions, and we're going to dig into them here. This one comes from KJ asking, what are the chances of acquiring an OG-type wing to start next season or drafting one that'll be able to contribute from day one, considering the Raps went with RJ and IQ in the OG trade, not picks, thus accelerating the Scotty timeline? Yeah, this is the difficult situation the Raptors find themselves in, is where they're kind of are at the point where it seems like they want day one of next season to be go time with the Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Jakob-Poeltl team. And that's not to say that go time means, oh, you have to go and be a top 6 seed in like an Eastern Conference contender or anything like that. No, I think the goal next year is probably, fight to be a top 8 team at the very least and see if you can sneak into the 6 with some luck, with some, overperformance, whatever it might be. And I think that's sort of part of the Eastern Conference where the Heat look a little bit wobbly, and who knows what's going to happen with the Pacers. Do the Magic find their guard? The Bulls, obviously, I don't think are a team to be all that feared of going forward. Feared of? They're not to be feared. They're not the team you're afraid of. I'm good at English. It's a really good thing I speak English for my job on camera and into a microphone. Either way, that sort of 6 through 8 range of the East is, I think, where this team wants to get. And I don't think they can get there right now without some serious upgrades on the wing. And to KJ's question, look, I think the chances of acquiring an OG type wing are mostly zero because there are very few wings like OG in the world of basketball. He is kind of a unique situation in that he can defend quite credibly 1 through 5. He's a very good 3-point shooter. He is a guy who drives positive play simply by walking onto the floor. Those guys don't grow on trees. They are hard to find. And so looking at the draft, look, even OG himself, the way his career arc went with the Raptors is sort of one of a kind. You're very rarely going to see someone drafted and then instantly become a starter on a 59-win team and add and be like a piece that helps that team get to that 59-win total. That's just like an anomaly when it comes to rookies. And if you look at this year's draft, we talked about the draft yesterday. If you want some draft talk on the college prospects to watch in March Madness, go listen to yesterday's show with Matthew Winnick from The Score. It was a great show. But the wing prospects this year, they all come with pretty big caveats. OG Anunoby's caveat when he came into the draft was injury. People were worried about his knee. He had just had, I believe, ACL surgery, MCL surgery, whatever it was. He had missed a bunch of time, and it was unclear if the medicals were all that good on his end. Of course, those fears proved to be, injury-wise, obviously he's had some injuries, but the knees have always been pretty good for him. And so I think that was overblown. That was a miscalculation by teams. And there's, 15 teams who probably wish they had taken OG before the Raptors got him at number 23, 24, whatever it was. And so I think OG as a prospect was much more like physically ready and just kind of, prepared to step into the role that he had on that Raptors team where he was super low usage. He was there just to defend and be enormous, which he was able to do. Not that many rookies are able to do that. And so I would be kind of flabbergasted if any of the wing prospects in this year's draft could step in and have a similar role where they're knocking down 38% of their threes and offering high-end wing defense. That's just a lot to ask of any rookie, let alone a rookie in a draft class that has been deemed to be kind of meh and is full of guys that have pretty big caveats and big developmental areas where they have to get a lot better to really be viable NBA players. And so, Cody Williams, Matas Buzelis, Ron Holland, go on down the line, these guys who might be available for the Raptors as wing prospects, whether they have the 6th pick or whether they're picking later, maybe they get lucky and jump up in the draft. Like all these guys are going to take some time. Maybe Zachary Richache? Oh God, his name's going to be so hard to say. But Zachary Richache might be the one guy who you can kind of plug and play and say, hey, maybe he's not perfect, but he offers some stuff this team needs. He can knock down some threes. He's big, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that's the one guy where you think, okay, maybe he can have like an OG-like impact upon entering the league. He's playing pro in France. Maybe he's more ready for the pro game. But beyond that, and I would still say that's probably a long shot with Richache, but Richache, that is a hard name to say, and I kind of don't want the Raptors to take him just for that reason. But I just think it's a pretty long shot that anyone will have that kind of impact from day one. And so this leads me to sort of my preferred avenue for the Raptors to take when it comes to their wing situation, which is trade for somebody. Obviously, much easier said than done. It's hard to convince teams to part with their two-way wings. They are not a dime a dozen. They're a hard type of player to find, and maybe the most important type of player for completing rosters and being the finishing touches on lineups that make sense. They give you more positional versatility, more lineup diversity, all that type of stuff. And so it's hard to find those guys. That said, I think this summer there could be an opportunity to strike with where the Raptors sit. They have surplus picks. They have the Bruce Brown contract as salary matching. They have, the sort of financial landscape of the league shifting. Our team's going to be worried about being too expensive 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Are they looking to move off of guys before they have to pay them? Is a team like the Pelicans going to have wings available? Probably not, because the Pelicans rock and they should just keep that team together. But you never know. The Pelicans are cheap. That's the way they roll. The Wolves, pretty notable news today with the backing for the ownership group there falling out. What does that mean for their ability to pay the tax next season and be a very expensive team? Does the big contract of Jaden McDaniels, for example, become something they look to move off of to save some scratch if they wash out in the first round of the playoffs? That's interesting to keep an eye on. There's all sorts of teams out there that have wings who might be gettable. The Brooklyn Nets are bad and terrible. They have Dorian Finney-Smith, who's kind of a lesser guy. But if you could add him as like a stopgap on the wing, maybe not the worst call. Obviously, Mikal Bridges is like the white whale, would be an absolutely perfect fit on this version of the Raptors with RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl flanking him. That would be a pretty potent starting five that would give the Raptors a pretty real shot at being a top 6 team next season. Can you convince the Nets to move on from him? Are you part of a bidding war for him that you lose because other teams have more stuff? Are those other teams with more stuff looking to hoard their picks for bigger plays than a Mikal Bridges? There's all these sort of questions that make trades difficult. And so while I think that's sort of my preferred avenue is to hunt and look for guys this summer, I think the most likely solution to the wing problem is they probably draft 1 or 2 in the draft. They will not be instant solutions. They will be guys who over time move into roles where they're effective and are part of the bigger picture plans going forward. But I don't think you can expect much out of any rookie drafted this summer as far as, helping next year's team win basketball games, because rookies don't help teams win basketball games. It's just kind of a rule for the most part. But if you can find some stopgap additions on the market, free agency wise, trade wise, buy low type guys, to sort of be the guys who fill in for the next year or two while the guys you draft this summer develop into being part of your core. I think that's probably the most likely avenue here. And a few guys come to mind. Patrick Williams is sort of an interesting one. Still 22 years old. Has not been very good with the Chicago Bulls, of course. He's not going to be back with them next season. They, I believe, declined, turned down his qualifying offer or whatever language there is to not have him on the team next season. They have exercised that language in his contract. And so Patrick Williams is an interesting guy. Is he someone the Raptors try to get on a buy low, a second draft type guy, Florida State guy with Scotty Barnes? Didn't play together, but there's that Florida State connection, I believe 1 year apart. They surely know one another, et cetera, et cetera. Is that any sort of impact on him being a guy they covet? Maybe it makes him want to come to Toronto. There's also that. Williams is a guy who I think defensively brings what the Raptors badly need, which is just size and like some thickness at the 3 and 4 positions. Maybe that's a way they can go. Obviously, it's not gone super well for Patrick Williams in his career. He's had some injury stuff. His development's been stunted. But again, 22 years old. It's a guy I'm probably okay taking a look at. He shot 40% from 3 this season in a small volume. I guess not that small volume, 2.5 attempts a game. That's perfectly fine. You'll take that. He's been a good 3-point shooter his entire career, 41% on 2.8 attempts a game. Maybe worth a flyer there, despite the injury history with him. So that's a guy to kind of keep an eye on. Another one is like Naji Marshall with the Pelicans. They have a million wings. They can't pay him all, and he's a free agent this summer. He'd be a nice guy. I mean, his nickname is literally Knife. This is something the Raptors badly need, is someone who is like mean and nasty enough to earn the nickname Knife. That would be sweet. Naji Marshall's a guy I have an eye on as sort of a stopgap wing solution. I mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith. Caleb Martin's another free agent as well with the Miami Heat. Maybe he's a guy you bring in, although I'm a little less high on Caleb Martin. He feels like maybe one of those Heat Magic guys who, after leaving the pixie dust of Southern Florida, maybe becomes a little less effective. That said, he's a pretty decent player who is, who fits the part of what they need. Maybe he becomes a stopgap solution. That's the most likely outcome for the wing thing here is, sort of mid-level exception or less signings this summer with the draft guys that you take, hopefully becoming something, assuming they covet wings, which I really, really hope they do. But again, the sort of big thing there is if there's a swing to be made for a wing, I think the Raptors will very much be in on that because I do think they want to hit the go button with this team starting next season and not have another year of non-competitiveness. I frankly would lose my mind if they're non-competitive again next season because it sucks to watch non-competitive basketball every night. Either way, we'll continue on, come back on the other side, get into some more questions from you, the listeners, including why am I so jaded about the draft? People who listen to the show know I'm kind of a draft skeptic. We will get into my origin story as a draft skeptic coming up in just 1 second as we continue to go through the mailbag. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We keep it rolling here on your Wednesday edition of Locked On Raptors. Of course, tomorrow we will break down these skeleton Raptors without Emmanuel Quickley, without RJ Barrett, without Jakob Poeltl, without Scotty Barnes, taking on the Sacramento Kings tonight. It's not going to be pretty, one would assume, but hey, the Kings have been a roller coaster of emotion this year themselves. Maybe there's a surprise, spoilery win in there in the Raptors some way, somehow. Highly doubt it without Quickley. It's going to be tough stuff. Either way, we will have it broken down for you, try to pull the silver linings as we've done with these games, and we'll probably maybe have some thoughts on some college stuff too, as we got Colorado taking on Boise State tonight with two interesting potential Raptors draft pick prospects in Cody Williams and Tristan DeSilva going. So draft stuff fully in gear here as well. But let's get into another mailbag question from you, the listeners. This one comes from Stago, and as I teased before, He asked, which specific draft pick broke you to go into F them kids mode? There has to be a specific player where you're hyped about that didn't pan out to totally bail on the draft, right? If it's not one specific guy, please name a group of players or a story why you have soured on that sweet, sweet draft. Well, I think I'm surprised, honestly, that more Raptors fans don't feel this way about the draft. And let me just get my general position out there. The draft is important. The draft is where you're probably going to get very good players and you sort of build your team up and all that stuff. Like, it's great to have cost-controlled guys who are cheap at the back end of your bench, who you can develop, who are young, who have upside, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the draft is unimportant. I do think the draft gets overvalued, and I do think I'm someone who's just more on the side of get me established players. I want to watch good basketball, and I kind of don't want to go through the rigmarole of 3, 4, 5 years of watching guys maybe develop into something, because a lot of times guys develop into not all that much. And so I think pinning all of your hopes on the draft is a pretty, it's a dire way to go. Sometimes you get incredibly lucky, and this is kind of where I'm at. I think draft success is mostly dumb luck. Either you've lucked into jumping up in the draft to a spot where you can draft a franchise-changing player, or you get lucky enough that the team in front of you completely duffs a pick. The Kings and the Suns, when it came to Luka Doncic and DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, the Mavericks have no reason to have Luka Doncic. They didn't do anything novel to get Luka Doncic, just a bunch of teams screwed up. The Hawks traded him to the Mavericks, because of draft night trade stuff. It just, to me, is so luck-based that I don't like centering my team-building philosophy around things that are very much out of your control and things that are totally based on luck. The Spurs have Victor Wembanyama. They didn't do anything cool or novel or smart to get Victor Wembanyama. They were just bad at the right time. And sometimes you're bad at the wrong time. Sometimes you win the lottery at the wrong time, aka Andrea Bargnani, which I guess is sort of maybe not Exhibit A. He might be Exhibit B, with Rafael Araujo being Exhibit A of my draft contempt. But, Andrea Bargnani, the Raptors win the lottery. They win it in a year where it's not so great. They take Bargnani first overall. There were other guys there to be taken for sure. LaMarcus Aldridge, obviously the big one, Brandon Roy, Rudy Gay. But none of those guys would have taken the Raptors into any sort of title contention, I reckon, considering how else that team was built, what they already had in the door, the TJ Ford injury stuff that would creep up later on. It's just that team was not probably going anywhere, regardless of where they finished in that draft lottery, because it just wasn't a very good draft lottery. The next year, Kevin Durant and Greg Oden are the 1-2 guys. And, well, lo and behold, the Sonics luck into Kevin Durant because Greg Oden was the pick at 1. It's so out of your control. It's so luck-based that I would rather do things that are sort of tangible as a team builder and say, hey, that guy is good. Let me trade for that guy so he's on my team and can be good for me right now. That's kind of where I come down on the draft. I also think my feelings on the draft and being a bit of a skeptic are tied largely to, I've seen the Raptors build a team without having to lean on the draft for their best players. Yes, the title Raptors used the draft to draft Jakob Poeltl, who they then parlayed indirectly into Kawhi Leonard. Maybe directly, I don't know. He wasn't the big reason why that trade happened, but he was a part of it. They draft OG Anunoby. He becomes a massive piece, obviously. Norm Powell, a second-round pick. Again, insanely lucky to get a second-round pick of that quality. And, sure, the Raptors had some say in his development with the 905 and stuff like that. But it's also, again, largely luck-based as to, your 46th pick can be Norm Powell. It can also be Delano Banton. And there's just a lot of randomness to it all. You don't know these guys. These are 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are very unmolded as people, who have, all sorts of stuff you don't know, just in terms of their personal makeups, things like that. A lot of it's very unknowable. And so, again, I would rather, instead of hoping that a draft pick turns into someone, trade for someone who is a draft pick who has turned into someone who is established. And I think, I'm also a baseball fan. I think this is kind of partly, obviously NBA prospects are a little more bankable than baseball prospects are. But I think a lot of my feelings on the draft about, with the NBA also stem from baseball prospects letting me down thousands and thousands of times over and over again. And the sort of preferred method of building a team in baseball being hoard lots of prospects, trade them for a really good player, and then have that really good player play for you for a long time. And I think that's kind of always been the way I view things when it comes to the draft. It's just such a luck-based enterprise that to have it be your sort of guiding principle as a team builder, I just think it's you're asking for a lot of pain unless you're one of those teams that gets insanely lucky, kind of without any sort of control over the situation. Again, it's not one specific guy. There have been guys who I thought would be great and who weren't great, guys who I thought would be bad who turned out well. Like, again, it's just kind of whack-a-mole. And there are obviously, this is not to say that I don't value the people who do this stuff for a living, who watch these guys, who live in it, who travel around the world. Our guy, Rafael Barlow, for example, over at Locked On NBA Big Board, this guy travels overseas to watch these guys in person. He knows more about prospects. You'll forget more about prospects by lunch than I will ever know about prospects. But the sort of larger history of the NBA suggests that it's really hard to turn the draft into guys who are going to win championships for you. Even the teams that are the top contenders right now, the Nuggets obviously got insanely lucky drafting Nikola Jokic. Any team could have had Jokic. They got him at 46 or whatever it was. Great for them. Or was it in the 50s? I don't know. But they got super lucky and got Jokic. Anyone could have had Jamal Murray in that 2016 draft where it wasn't all that great a draft at the top. And he goes 7th when he probably should have gone a little bit higher. Again, luck. And so they've turned that luck into a wonderful thing in Denver. But it's not like they went in thinking, okay, the draft is going to be the way we build our team over the next 10 years with this 2nd round pick and this 7th overall pick. It's just a tough thing to bank on. The Oklahoma City Thunder, yes, they've used the draft beautifully. They also traded for their best player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Celtics got their draft picks, sure. Tatum, Brown, those are guys who are driving forces of their team. They also got super lucky to trade up with a Sixers team that was fascinated by Markelle Fultz, and they traded down or whatever it was. They got lucky there. The Fultz thing blowing up in the Sixers' face and the Tatum thing not blowing up for the Celtics. Again, just sort of one of these draft night luck things that, it's hard to predict these things when they happen, when they're happening in real time as to how they're going to eventually end up. And they also were gifted those picks by the Nets making a trade that was basically forced by their insane owner who wanted to go and win a playoff series or whatever with a rich, expensive team. So again, it's very much luck based. That's why I'm so sort of against banking all of your chips on the draft. And even if you draft a guy high, there's no guarantee that they're going to become what you need them to be for your team. In fact, it's far more likely they will not become that. And so I would rather find established players, trade for them, and have them be on your team. The Raptors won a championship trading for Kyle Lowry, trading for Kawhi Leonard, trading for Marc Gasol. Yes, the draft got them DeMar DeRozan. Yes, the draft got them Jonas Valanciunas. All of that stuff is true. The draft, it's a bit of both. You got to have both things clearly, but I think especially for a team like the Raptors, it's not a free agent destination that, sure, they're not a type of team that is going to go and tank for many, many years to try to get a number 1 pick and get lucky. It's just not how Masai Ujiri and the front office is wired. And frankly, I think teams that do that kind of lose generations of fans as a result. Imagine this Raptors season repeated 4, 5, 6 times over as they hope to get some lottery luck. That's a grim scene. We've seen that in the early era of the Raptors as well, where they were really bad all the time and just didn't get the lottery luck. They got Chris Bosh in the year where LeBron James went number 1 and Carmelo Anthony was in the top 3 and Dwayne Wade went 1 pick behind. That was an unlucky. It was great to get Bosh, but grand scheme of things, they were kind of the unlucky team in that draft who also maybe drafted the wrong guy between Wade and Bosh. It's just a difficult thing to nail, and it's so unknowable. There's all these sort of variables and factors that no front office can fully have a handle on. And so that's kind of where my draft skepticism comes from. I understand its importance. You need it. You need a little bit of both. Talent acquisition of pro players who are already good. Your pro scouting has to be great. Your amateur scouting has to be great with drafting. You have to find, diamonds in the rough. You got to get super lucky. But again, it's the luck thing that leaves me kind of feeling ho-hum on the draft being the be-all, end-all for team building. And it's fine to disagree. That's also fine too. But I will leave that there. Hopefully this has been a bit of an origin story for those who are curious as to why I find the draft to be a little bit overvalued. We got more coming up. We'll round out the show with a handful of rapid-fire mailbag questions to close out the show. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play are built right in to the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. There's also the Nissan Pathfinder. It's got room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Go check them out. Back at it here, closing out a mailbag edition of the Locked On Raptors podcast. Thank you as always for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Being our everydayers out there, we love you little sickos. You're the best. And of course, reminder, go check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7. It's available all day on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 YouTube channel. Locked On shows, the national shows covering the biggest stories, the local shows covering those stories with only the local angle you can get from Locked On. Go check it out. Locked On Sports Today 24/7. All right. Rapid fire questions to round out the show here. This one comes from Skip to My Lou asking, who makes the playoffs first with their respective cores, Raptors or Spurs, and why? I think this is tilted a little bit in the Raptors' favor, just a touch, because the West is a bear of a conference. That said, Victor Wembanyama is unbelievable. And if the Spurs go and do anything to sort of bolster that roster, if they go trade for Trae Young, if they go find some sort of lead guard to pair with that team, maybe a defensive wing type, who knows? Like, they're one or two guys away from probably being a playoff team in the Western Conference, because Wemby is that good and figures to be that much better between now and the start of next season. So while the Raptors are in the tougher conference, Wembanyama is just an absolute freak unicorn player and is probably the kind of guy who can take a team to the playoffs within 2 years, 3 years of entering the NBA. He's just that insane. And so, yeah, he's probably the answer here. That said, the Raptors could make the playoffs as early as next season if they make the right moves this offseason and you get the incremental growth that you expect to get from a Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the Raptors, despite what we're seeing right now, this completely depleted team that is not their team, I think they're not as grim and dire as it's been so far this year. They're not a 23-45 team on pure talent alone. Put that talent together, have it on the floor together, give it some runway, more than 10 games worth of runway to play with one another. And I think you probably get some pretty decent results. Playoff level, maybe not, but certainly like better than the Bulls, which is not at that high a bar to clear. But I think like better than the Bulls is the sort of goal for next season, at least in my mind. And I think that's totally on the table. I think had they been healthy down the stretch, there's a very real chance they would have made their way into the play-in as well. They were playing some pretty good ball before Scotty got hurt, before Yak got hurt, before everything went down the tubes. But yeah, Spurs is the answer here because Wemby is a freaking unbelievable thing I've never seen before, and it's horrifying. And the basketball's been solved and is ruined. Let's go. Last one here. Actually, two more. Quick one. Psychic. How are we feeling about the glimpses we've gotten of two big lineups? Could or should we see more? It's not been good so far. They've not used a ton of two big lineups this year. It's been mostly one big lineups. The two big lineups, the two big lineups that they've had like on the floor recently, Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Poeltl, not so good. 19 possessions, a minus 68.4 net rating. Again, it's 19 possessions. That's nothing at all. And so I don't know how you reckon any of that. I think Poeltl, Olynyk together, I'm not super sold on it defensively. I think Olynyk kind of on the perimeter trying to guard fours, not really what you want. Probably in all likelihood, I think he's best served as a 5 who has like a helper at the 4 next to him. Like Olynyk, Boucher, I think kind of makes some sense as a lineup. I wouldn't even classify that as a double big lineup just because Boucher is a 4 to me. But yeah, I think that's a lineup I'm not like all that keen on seeing more of. We've also seen Kelly Olynyk, Jonte Porter, also very tiny sample, 25 possessions. plus 73.3 net rating. So that's fun. But yeah, I'm not thinking that's a lineup for the future either, frankly. I think that's pretty tough defensively. The movement on defense, the feet, not quite there. And again, 25 possessions is nothing. It's nothing to go on as far as a sample size. So I'm saying the two big lineups as of right now, not super keen. If they bring in some kind of big in the draft who, we talked about Yves Missi yesterday, right? A rim running big man who, throws down lobs, is switchable defender. I could be open to some two-man lineups, two big lineups with him and Olynyk because of Olynyk's shooting to kind of balance out the lack of Missi's shooting. But yeah, I'm not super keen on that either because I think this team has enough in terms of like wings and guards, at full health, at least with Scotty Barnes and Barrett and Quickley available and Grady Dick and all down the line, where you don't necessarily have to go to the too big look. If you don't have to force it, right? And I don't think they have guys who are such obvious too big fits together that it really makes sense to lean into it too hard. Last question here. This comes from Stago. Once again, rounding up the show. We'll bookend the show with a Stago question. I guess he had the second segment question. Never mind. It's not bookending anything. But Stago asked, assuming the 7 NBA players return to Team Canada for the Olympics, who would you pick for the final 5 spots? This is a tough one because there's lots of guys to pick and some guys are going to be left off. There are some guys who I'd like to pick who are either returning from injury or have not really played for Canada all that much or really expressed interest in it. I'm talking Brandon Clark here, who's missed this season with an Achilles injury. Is he going to be ramping up to get back to NBA shape? Is he even going to be in the conversation? We know Team Canada needs bigs, but I'm not sure Brandon Clark's going to be the avenue there. I know Tristan Thompson's been playing some decent backup ball for the Cavs this year. Is he someone they can really lean on? I don't know. He obviously got suspended for PEDs. I don't know how. Maybe not. Can he be in the Olympics if he's tested positive for PEDs in the year before the Olympics? I'm not sure, but that's I'm not keen on the Tristan Thompson thing. Frankly, I'm not sure he adds all that much other than like rebounding and size. I think with the big situation, the 7 guys, just to refresh for everybody: Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, RJ Barrett, Lou Dort, Dylan Brooks, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kelly Olynyk, and Dwight Powell are the 7 guys who were NBA players on last year's bronze medal winning team of the World Cup. So you got 5 spots to play with. Obviously, it's tough, right? Do you honor the guys who have been there through the thick and thin? I'm thinking Melvin Ejim in particular, who has been there with the national team and all these different tournaments over the years. Like, does he just get like an honorary spot on this team, even though he might not play all that much? I don't know if you can do that in a tournament where you're going to be tested to your absolute limits against the best teams in the world. It might be that Melvin Ejim gets the short end of the stick, which would suck and, kind of leave me feeling a little bit sour and sad for him, but that might just be the reality here. The no-brainer is Jamal Murray's on this team, clearly. Like, I think he's number 8, no problem. If he's healthy, if he's available, I think he wants to play. We'll see if the Nuggets go on another title run. Does he have the juice to play? Does he play limited roles? Is he a bench guy? Whatever. But I think Murray's the obvious guy if you can get him there. Andrew Wiggins, I don't know what the deal with Andrew Wiggins is. Does he want to play for the team? Is he in a good spot to play for the team? It's obviously been a strange season for him with the Warriors, where he's been up, he's been down, he's been up, he's been down, he's been out of the lineup. It's been a weird year for Wiggins. Wiggins is just kind of like a big question mark for me with the Olympic team, but he would be on the team probably if he's available because wings are important. Trey Lyles, to me, feels like he has to be on the team. He's he's talented, he's a nice connector. I feel like he's a FIBA-friendly player. I feel like I would have Trey Lyles. Andrew Nembhard, they're pretty chock full of guards, right? They've got Shai, they've got Nickeil, they'll have Murray, but I think Nembhard is your 4th guard. I think is a pretty decent call. He's a good point of attack defender, can shoot a little bit. I think he's probably there. And then the number 12 spot, I kind of think you should reserve it for Zach Edey, even though I'm not sure Edey's like all that great a player. I think he's probably more of a FIBA player than he is an NBA player at the moment. We'll see. Maybe he's an NBA player too. We'll see in the tournament how well he's performing. He's obviously been fantastic for 2 seasons with Purdue, but I do wonder if Edey, just because of the size, you get him in there for like situational stuff. Just having a guy who's that enormous on your team might be of some use, even if he might have some defensive deficiencies in open space and things like that. It's a tough one. I think Edey probably gets that 12 spot just because they're so starved for bigs. It's Olynyk and Powell. They can't really, and if they have Lyles, that gives you some insulation, but there's not a ton of options there at the big man spot. So I would say probably Edey is the guy. And so, yeah, Murray, Wiggins, Lyles, Nembhard, Edey's my group. Shaedon Sharpe, I know, is someone people who will want on the team. I think maybe he was just like a little bit too inefficient for me this year with the Blazers, and maybe a little bit young. He's still only 20 years old. He's probably a guy for future years. I think as well, like Ben Mathurin, if Wiggins can't go, maybe Mathurin's the guy you slot in for him. Just some spark plug scoring, can take over a quarter here and there. You never know when that could be useful. So those are the guys I think are kind of in the running. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do with the sort of old heads who've been around. And is a Scrub brother going to make the team? Probably not. But like the Scrub brothers have been around. Like Phil Scrubb's been on the team for years now. And has been a big part of them getting to where they are. So it'll be fascinating to see how those political decisions are made with the guys who've been there, who are maybe not the highest end talent guys with all the NBA guys available. We'll see. Injury obviously will play a factor too, but that's my kind of first blush guess. I'm sure this will change many, many times over the next few months as the Olympics draw near. We will leave it there. Thank you, everyone, who sent in questions. You're all the best. You are the wonderful people who keep this show going, who keep me going every single day. Even though this team is a drag to talk about right now, we're still going to make it fun. We're still going to do it, baby. So we're back again tomorrow. Talk about Raptors Kings. Talk about Cody Williams and Tristan da Silva. My dude, Tristan da Silva for Colorado, hopefully winning in their first 4 game tonight against Boise State. We will, take a look ahead to the rest of the tournament. We'll talk about that probably on Friday. Some, notable performances from prospects, things like that. We got lots of draft coverage on the way here. Lots of coverage of the final stretches of the season with things to watch, etc. Season in review stuff. It's all coming. So don't go anywhere, even though the team stinks. The podcast doesn't. It's still fun. It's going to be a good time. So thank you for hanging out. We will talk to you again on Thursday for another episode of Locked On Raptors. In the meantime, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, go to YouTube, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Find me on the Hell site at Woodley Sean. Find the show at Locked On Raptors. Join the Discord, and we'll talk to you again Thursday. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.